are at the recycling line and sortation line that are helping us have discussions that are connecting the value chain. It's really shaping the way that we're doing things in a completely different way to how we've done it before. We've got some excellent panelists today that are going to talk about their experience. We'll dig into a little bit of the challenges as well, some of the remaining gaps that we have to fill to scale some of these technologies, and also the opportunities that are ahead of us if we work together to scale them. We're going to start just by doing some introductions to the technologies and to the panelists that are with us today. Yasid Chalmer is here from Grey Parrot, and he's going to talk about their new development next.
Hi everyone, sorry, I just realized I have a very loud microphone. My name is Yasid, as Amy said. For those who were here yesterday, I gave a presentation on the discovery stage with some data, but we also have a stand if you would like to come and see our technology in action. So for those who don't know about Grey Parrot, we started about 6 years ago with a goal of trying to extract and identify value from waste. And what we mean by that is how can we, of everything that we throw away, how can we make sure that there is associated value with it? And so we work with facilities like Biffa, Veolia, Suez. We're in 20 different countries. And the aim is to empower, so there are two goals. The first goal is to empower the waste facilities to operate their facilities at a higher efficiencies, so they can improve their margins and operate more efficiently. And secondly, with Deep Nest, it's about identifying and helping brands understand where their products are going through the recycling and sortation journey, and what optimizations could they do for their packaging so it sorts better, it's designed within real world constraints. So an example of this is you have so this is a facility that we just installed. I think it was maybe about 15 of our analyzers. You can see them here, the pink boxes, you can't miss them. And they are basically the eyes of a facility. They're the eyes and the brains. They see everything that goes through the facility, and that's a lot of data. You can see here 1.5 billion waste objects. So the way I sort of say that is everything that a consumer consumes or buys from a supermarket and intentionally or erroneously throws in the recycling bin, we see. And that is a vast data trove that we are able to help the facilities like this one here, like Biffa, but also help brands. And I'll just end with the next one, if it was to work. And then it stops. There you go. I don't think the click is working. But so what we do with Deep Nest is basically using the data that we capture through these facilities is then to identify, and this video will show you in more detail, that the AI model is not only able to understand milk jugs or HDPE bottles, but it can also understand who the retailer is behind it. So I think this one's going to play now, but this gives you a good context of how the model works. So it's able to see, as it goes through the facility, what object is it and who does it belong to. This data is then used for the brands to help understand their packaging, but also what recommendations that they can do for future changes. So anyway, that was a long-winded introduction, sorry.
Great introduction, sorry about the slides. Claudia Rosori is joining us from Ocado Retail. She's a packaging technologist, and Ocado has been right at the forefront of tagging technology trials. And I'm really grateful that you're joining us just to speak a little bit about what inspired you to actually get involved and invest in resources in this area.
Yes, no, absolutely. Welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I work as a packaging technologist for Ocado Retail. And what inspired us, am I going to have my slides now or later? Now? Okay, sorry. No, I should bonus, okay. Should I go next? Yeah? Go ahead. Okay. So just to tell a little bit about Ocado for the ones that don't know, we are the largest online dedicated supermarket, and we are a joint venture of Mark Expenses and Ocado Group. We reach 80% of the UK population operating in England and Wales. And we delight over 1 million regular customers with an unbeatable range of over 50,000 products. Out of those, we have our own brand line, 750 lines, as well as over 7,000 from the Market Expenses and then a variety of niche product sizes. And we operate via distribution centers, which are 7 called CFCs, customer fulfillment centers. And then maybe to Emmy's point, what inspired us to be investing in digital technologies for the sorting lines, it comes from our sustainability strategy, which is named Planet Together. So within that strategy, it not only delivers our legal obligations as a producer, but also ensures the resilient profitability and longevity of Ocado as a business, as well as doing the right thing for future generations and the planet. So within the strategy, we have 5 key pillars, and one of them, responsible packaging, is a key one for us, which we have a pledge when it comes to packaging to halve the environmental impact of our packaging systems by 2030. And the way we see to be able to achieve those targets is to actively redesign our packaging, prioritizing sustainability, and fulfilling prioritizing sustainability. And with that in mind, we do has a focus on the waste strategy in the hierarchy of the waste. So packaging reduction, reuse, recyclability, recycled content are key drivers. In terms of how we see this happening and being future-proof, we would like to be a forward-thinking business delivering systemic changes through advocacy, innovation, and English partnership. Which then brings to what we have been doing in that area for the trials we have been running. So a clear example of our future-proof goals are the pioneering trials we have been doing since 2022. So the picture of the milk bottle, you can clearly see the UV tagging as part of it, as well as the QR code. So back in 2022, we did our world's first pilot alongside Polytag and GS1 UK, and we print to those milk bottles serialized QR codes. That was printing over 1.6 million bottles of milk, trying to test the viability of a digital depository scheme. That was linked to a rewards for recycling, which is the app you can see on the second picture. So each serialized QR code would then redeem the 20p, provided the customers engage with the app and the scheme. So we set over 20,000 rewards redeemed in just 55 days, and over 3,000 customers participating in it. So we also have been doing the 2D QR codes, those no serialized, but per product, as you can see on the banana pictures. We have them as part of our standard operation procedures on over 200 of our own brand lines. And the way we see those QR codes is like endless labels, where allow us to share far more information with our customers than physical packaging can. And then just to conclude on the trials, and I'm sorry I'm taking a bit too long, since July last year, we became the first UK to roll out invisible UV tags to all our range of milk. This is not a trial anymore, this is our operation procedure for milks. So the way it works is having those UV taggings now allow us for the first time being able to assess the packaging systems that are captured once provided they are entering the correct recycling stream. And with that data, we would like to use it as a way of shining a line in the recycling process and bringing the confidence to our consumers that when they do the efforts at home about putting the right bin, that action is being captured in the end of life. And then the goal is helping boosting recycling rates across the UK. So with that said, I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Claudia. It's so good to understand the brand perspective. So why are brands getting involved in some of this work? I mean, this is absolutely the case. We've got the tech providers, obviously other tech providers in the room like Polytag. Claudia, you kindly walked through obviously what's inspiring brands to get involved in this work. And then we've got Anthony Hornsby, who's joining us from Sherborne Recycling. The partnerships and communications manager for a very high-tech advanced sortation and advanced recycling company. It would be great if you could just talk through how are you engaging with some of these technologies as well?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. Yes, so my name is Anthony Hornsby, Partnerships and Communications at Sherborne Recycling. Those of you who may not know Sherborne Recycling is a purpose-built, state-of-the-art, local authority-owned materials recycling facility. Effectively, what we're trying to do is get value and efficiency from the recycling chain of all of the products and packaging that goes into the recycling bins from residents through our integrated solutions process that we have at the facility. We have AI robot arms as part of that process, and effectively what we do, our main goal is to work with the local authorities to get control over their recycling of obviously the collections that they do. However, because of the facility that we have, we are also able to work with packaging manufacturers and other companies alike to understand in what we call our living lab in the facility, better understanding and research around what their packaging is doing and how it's affecting through the supply chain. And that obviously helps with things such as eco-modulation. We offer packaging expertise. And effectively also with our position, we can have a look at the whole supply chain. We've got local authorities from one side, we've got the sortation facility where we're at, obviously all the technology that's included and the process there, and obviously where we send all of the material down the supply chain and our off-takers and people that use them to turn them into new products. I should imagine a lot of them which are in this room.
Thanks, Anthony. And just if I stay with you for a minute, I think it's really interesting that you have this living lab. There are some really hard to recycle materials that we have to deal with at the end of their chain, at the end of life. How do you see some of these hard to recycle materials being addressed by this technology and this development?
Yeah, so I mean, luckily we're at a stage where we've invested in technology that makes it easier to address some of the difficulties around those materials that are more harder to recycle. For example, flexible packaging is something that we're able to recycle for the residents of our local authorities in a fully commingled bin, entirely within that bin, not in any survival bags or something as well, because we have technology throughout the process being able to do that. Where I think technology is going to need to improve, and also the industry and packaging design, is the understanding of how, when you're making a product and the materials that you use, the difficult challenges that actually, when you put material A and material B together, how that impacts on the infrastructure that is actually in the country. Mono-material products are always beneficial, easier to recycle. I know that that can't be the same for every single product you're ever going to make and design in terms of the packaging, but certainly would be a key consideration.
I mean, I think this is really interesting because obviously, from your perspective, flexibles you can manage. I know a lot of brands and retailers will have challenges with flexibles. Other stakeholders across the industry are thinking about flexibles as simpler recycling is coming in. Casey, if I just move to you, how do you see this technology working? Are there trials that you've run for hard to recycle materials where you can start to see stakeholders upstream and downstream engaging with you on how to overcome some of these challenges?
Yeah, so I think for the hard to recycle materials, I think I would start with what is hard to recycle, partly because I think we know maybe from the waste facility side, as the tech provider, we can see it. Does the brand know what is hard to recycle? And obviously, thankfully, regulation and guidelines are giving a bit more of a spotlight into what is hard to recycle. One of the things that, one of the works that we're doing is on a fiber study with composite cups. So this is working with the Fiber Alliance, the Cup Collective, M&S, Costa, McDonald's in understanding what is happening to fiber, so fiber cups, as well as food service packaging. And though it wasn't necessarily a hard to recycle material, it's a hard to understand material because you've got Huhtamaki in the value chain creating the cups. You've got the brands distributing the cups, consumers obviously consuming the contents of the cups and disposing it. You've got the waste facilities, so Biffa and Veolia, who manage these contracts, And then you've got Stora Enso and the other paper mills pulping the paper. So what we were working with, and it's a big study that is going on at the moment, is really understanding across all these food outlets in 2 regions in Europe, where is that going? And I think that's really putting the spotlight in terms of where are cups and food packaging dropping off, in terms of are the waste facilities rejecting them, but actually the paper mills can accept more than they are currently accepting of composites. So I think that's kind of like one of the interesting studies to really understand something that is, again, maybe not hard to recycle, but really hard to understand. You could say it's hard to recycle because there is the perception that composites behave in a certain way, but unfortunately nothing is black and white. It's all shades of gray. So it's about really identifying of the food services, of the cups, what is working well, what's not working well, and why is it not working well. And then that will help understand in the value chain, where do we need to optimize.
And what would you say from your kind of early learnings? I know it's too early for the insights to be shared.
Yeah.
In terms of engaging the value chain in this process on cups, I mean, it's like you said, it can be hard to recycle in some ways, in some perspectives, but it's really more of a question of we don't have the data to tell us what's happening with cups. So how have brands and retailers been responding to this?
So I think one of the biggest interesting things, and obviously it's too early to share some of the findings publicly, but I think I can say this. If anyone here has been to a Costa outlet, they don't typically give you a sleeve. They double stack your cup, right? And so double stacking, is that an issue? Because these sorting processes are calibrated for precision. So what does double stacking do to the sortation with the lid on or off, or with even the Starbucks or the M&S kind of paper wrapper around it? So being able to show the brands the proportion of their cups that are double stacked, that have the lids, I can safely say lids intact with the cups, is very rare and near non-existent. So that's a good confirmation that lids are very unlikely to be attached to the cup. But you would know this as well, but from a sortation side, are the cups flattened? Do they go via the 2D, which is thumbs up, or does it go under 3D, which is, there's more complex processing there? So even giving that visibility to the brand was so interesting. And I think now we've seen the data, the preliminary data showing that actually it's able to quantify not that it's an issue, but what this current situation is like. And it's actually bringing a spotlight. So I'm hoping in the coming months we'd share a lot more about it.
And I think that's a brilliant kind of segue, obviously, to Claudia. From your perspective, with your digital deposit trials, the milk bottles, what have you been finding? What have been your main takeaways on the limitations of this technology and also the opportunities?
Yeah, and so that's a very good question. So, reflecting back on the trials that we've done back in 2022 with the serialized QR codes for the potential viability of the digital deposit scheme, one of the things that came as a takeaway was that convenience is a catalyst for behavior change. So when we do the trials, we also run a customer survey user to understand how were they engaging with the trial and what were their thoughts about it. And so the home-based digital scheme where they would scan the QR code, place it in their bin, directly through the app, and get the routine right at the same moment, was the perfect choice of all the ones in trials. So we had over 70% of them choosing that over a physical deposit scheme, which for us goes to say that a digital solution could be a hybrid model for the new regulations that come into place, such as DRS. It gives a little bit more flexibility, it brings a little bit more of inclusivity as well, because not everyone will be able to be bringing bottles back to physical stores. So with that in mind, we became strong advocates to having those alternative ways to what's coming into force in the new years. But everything has a challenge. One of the biggest and very important part of that is, like, in order for those technologies to work, The digital handshake, as you say, needs to be perfect. It needs to work every single time precisely, so you don't risk kind of like frustrating your user and then they completely lose interest in the recycling process.
Like that, the digital handshake. Anthony, from your perspective, so now again, we're kind of shifting into the legislation space, but a lot of legislation coming our way that's been in the pipeline for a while, but it's really impacting the waste management industry now as we see EPR coming through and DRS incoming, simpler recycling, which we were talking about earlier. How are these things impacting you, and how do you see these technologies, these traceability technologies, helping you as well?
So the traceability technologies, I'm happy to say that at Sherborne Recycling we have a polytag unit where we're looking at some data that they're able to capture, similar to a number of technologies that are obviously out there and available, on top of the AI aspect that we're using at our facility too, and the data capture there, and that's telling us as well. So certainly diving into the data that's been able to capture to make informed decisions of what's coming down the pipeline and also what needs addressing immediately. In terms of how it affects us as a facility, we're lucky that obviously the design concept initially was kind of on the cusp and in and around when all of these legislations were being discussed, and have been built into the process to make sure that we're able. So with regards to simpler recycling, we are already and available to deal with the material that we're coming from the local authorities and their residents with regards to things like plastic bags and wrapping and the film, as I mentioned earlier. And I suppose that's one of the benefits of the design concept of the facility is you need to be agile, you need to be flexible. That's not the only legislation that's going to come in. You mentioned obviously DRS as well, and that's an interesting one from the perspective of local authorities in terms of the bottles and the cans that may be missing through the waste stream for our facility. But we can just absolutely adapt to whatever the waste stream is looking like and maybe focus on another material where there's an established end market and make sure that we're getting commercial value for the people that own our facility there too. And when it comes to EPR, again, really good start in terms of the local authorities receiving some of the money from that and the funding from that. I've already seen across the industry, teams are getting bigger. There are some hires in the education department in terms of recycling, both at local authority level and elsewhere. And we're seeing investment in technology as well. People are retrofitting some things on to make sure that they have access to that data going forward and things like that too. And I think there's also talk in the industry of obviously some facilities and other things like that that are being invested using this money too. So I think the whole industry is looking at that change when it comes to what they can do to progress themselves and obviously join up with the whole supply chain through those logistical changes. But from our perspective, as I say, we're in a good position where we're already dealing with what is coming, and we're in a really good position to be agile and flexible should anything else come through in the future.
Great. I think a question probably for all of you, because I know from your different trials, at each point in time, which of you has considered the legislation coming our way? You see, you've done some work with Great Parrot looking at that discussion and liaising with regulators. So I think in a similar way to what you're talking about with brands and retailers, how do you see this kind of body of data developing to help us inform legislation and to have discussions with legislation about evidence-backed policy change?
Yeah, I think, and you heard it here over the past 2 days, like if you went to the PAC UK talks, really putting the spotlight, they announced some of the data, these are things are moving in the right way. What was interesting, I caught up with Esther afterwards because she, on her slide, was talking about the composition of the different packaging types that is going, that has been put onto the market. And then, so interestingly, we did a 2025 look back of all the facilities in the UK that we operate. So we cover about 25% of the UK's waste that we see. So, and then we had a look to see if the data was roughly aligned with it, right? And then so there's them geeking out over the data over on this side that they really want to know, and then we're geeking out over the data on that side that they really want to know. And I think there is a situation of kind of like what I call like a win-win-win, is that brands need to know this information about how the recycling and sortation infrastructure in the UK or wherever market they operate in is like, so they can design for recycling in that side. The PRO is incentivized as a win there because PRO eco-modulation it's one of the topics that I get asked most by the brands is eco-modulation and what is that like in the future. And I mean, we don't have the formats here, but if I have, we work with L'Oreal, we announced that last week, but of their products, is there something here that might be okay today but not okay tomorrow? So again, if the PRO is able to baseline eco-modulation on real-world data at scale, that's a win because it means that it's not simulated data. So I think we're definitely moving in that way where the kind of like the brand will benefit, the municipality will benefit because you have more AI, you have more data solutions in there to provide this data and share it to an ecosystem. So from my perspective, I think it is kind of like a win-win-win. But the way I kind of saw it, and again, we know this, that the waste facility side saw the benefits very early on. You know, we started 6 years ago, we saw the benefits early on, and because of regulation putting the spotlight, brands are now seeing the benefits because they have to. I mean, I don't know, but and then you're going to have the PROs kind of seeing the benefits because they, in a way, they kind of want an easy process, right? They don't want to have to justify why is something like, you know, a simulated data saying X, but then I did a localized trial that says Y. What does this mean? Is everything is based on real world data and not assumptions? Win, win, win.
On the win-win. Harry, from your perspective, there obviously are challenges in getting the right level of data to be able to inform some of these decisions and to help connect it to regulation. What do you see as some of those barriers to that win-win-win?
So I think part of the reasons why we believe that data can benefit brands as well is like now that EPR comes into force for the UK, the industry is largely focused on one single metric, which is the total volume of packaging replaced in the market. And even though this is an important metric to be taken into consideration, we believe there are other metrics that should also be taken into consideration. With that said, having the hard data to show that our consumers boost their confidence in recycling and things like that, we would like to see that somehow reflect into those motivated EPR fees. There are other things, there's recycled content that if, at the minute, as it stands in legislation, we're not getting any benefits or modulated fees. And the other part, which is so important as part of the conversation today, is like the incentives and innovation. So if the framework of EPR could take into consideration the business and brands which are doing beyond minimum compliance, beyond just reporting based on micro packaging volumes, but they are investing in digital technology, they're trying to help their consumers to recycle more and better, they're trying to be the link that brings everything together, like the consumer behavior change, making reiterate like and help them to understand that all of this we're doing here, all these amazing technologies there are in social lines, if consumers keep in place in packaging in the wrong municipal solid streams, is not going to come to the labs to get sorted and then be able to increase recycling rates. So the consumer part and the way brands can communicate that should be taken into account. That's how we would like to see as a brand.
And I think this is important, right? Because we're talking about the consumer impact right the way through what decisions brands are making, how they're supporting consumer demand that's coming through. But technology providers kind of creating these solutions. And then I guess Anthony, from your perspective, what do you see as the challenges to this win-win-win scenario as well?
I think collaboration, communication, everyone in this audience gets a well done because you're here educating yourselves in terms of this panel and what we can impart on you as a first thing. So that needs to be replicated across the industry. You need people from packaging and designing and manufacturers to go out and understand, as we alluded to, how the infrastructure works. Even if their product is recyclable, just because it's made from a material that is supposed to be recyclable, can it actually go through the existing infrastructure? And also, are the end markets available to then turn it into a commodity as well? And I just think that first and foremost, that is the thing that we're going to have to do. The data capture is fantastic too. Everyone in this whole show will be considering the RAM assessments and everything in terms of what they're going to have to do. Everyone's going to be redesigning products to make sure they can obviously be green RAM or whatnot. As much information, as much data, as much collaboration and communication as you can get from the industry, understanding how it works and how your packaging goes from there to there, A to B, will absolutely set you on the right path.
Are you seeing more of that discussion happening now? Do you find that these technologies are enabling you to have that discussion upstream?
Absolutely. So us, as an example, we're working with a number of packaging manufacturers as part of our Living Lab capabilities to help them understand how their products and packaging go through a recycling process. And we can also then talk to the end markets to determine, whether or not they would be a commodity and reusable. I mean, there are some companies out there that would have, I don't know, as an example, the HDPE of a milk bottle that is natural. They would then colour it to make a product, and then when it goes to the end market, the coloured HDPE perhaps isn't worth what a natural one is. And we'd say to them, would you buy that to make your new product into? And they go, well, no, because we need it natural. It's thinking about those decisions in terms of the supply chain and obviously the circular economy as to what can affect everything through the line.
I'm conscious of time, and I'd like to leave some time for questions as well. But before we get to that, I thought I'd just do one last question for each of you. I mean, we've spoken about some of the really great opportunities with the technologies. We've spoken about some of those challenges to scale up. We've discussed some of the changes we've seen in the discussions that are happening across the value chain. But what would be your one ask to say to the audience, if you're a brand, a producer, a technology provider, or another waste management company, what do you guys need to see to make sure that these technologies are really helping us close that gap in the recycling discussions?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
So I think, and I think you mentioned it, but I think it kind of like, so collaboration, I think it's a big one. Because of EPR regulation, I think there was hesitance from brands to really understand what the data is going to say, because is it going to be complementary data? Like, what's it going to tell me about my product, and do I want to know about that? But that question is not happening anymore because they kind of need to know what's happening about their product. So I think kind of like I would say it's a collaboration that just have a conversation with us or anyone in that value chain, just to really understand, and it could be an innovation team, it could be the packaging team, the sustainability team. But I mean, and this is what really good about a show like this, and I was in Paris Packaging Week, is the brands are sending more of their people out to these to really understand and embrace. So the conversations we're getting are really interesting because they're now kind of like taking that knowledge and thinking about the questions. So it's not about, okay, should we have the data? Or what would the data say? It's what can we use the data and how could it make us better? So I would say start with have a think about, and I think you all know if you're a brand or a packaging manufacturer, we've spoken about both over the 2 days, is what is your hypothesis? What is some of your most problematic packaging, or what are the things that keeps you up at night? And have a conversation with some of the people in the value chain, because it's not a nightmare. It's not as much as a nightmare as you might think.
And it's constantly evolving, and I think we've had discussions, all of us, just about what are these challenges now, today, what's the one that we're going to be facing in a year's time, and how, we were just talking about this earlier, how do you actually coordinate different objectives across very different industries, but knowing that we're all working towards a very similar thing. The more we have those discussions, obviously, the better. And Claudia, how are you feeling about it? What would be your main ask for stakeholders today?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think, like, from the business case scenario, like, we need to be realistic. To be asking business to invest in those technologies, we need to prove the return on investment. This is the key part. And we see in two ways. It needs to be a tangible advantage for business to do that. So, as I mentioned before, I think the regulations give us, so policymakers give us an opportunity here, so to rebuild the framework within EPR, to actually incentivize innovations, and then to those brands and retailers which are doing above and beyond, or like more than like minimum compliance, they should be those efforts reflect into those modality fees. This would be what we're going to be bringing back to the leadership team's conversations and kind of explaining to them why it's good to be part of and getting the data, getting the hard data. But also, there is another kind of like ask this to be like an industry-wide change, systemic change that is going to be representative. It's not just like one brand in isolation doing that, and we need more of the rest of the industry to come forward to collect and trial those digital technologies. So we have, real sense of why it's important to invest in that, and then we scale the whole infrastructure, and then move forward as a full value chain.
Thanks, Claudia. And Anthony, what would you like to see? What would be your main ask?
So when you asked the question, I wrote down 3 bullet points immediately that come to mind, and let's strip away all of the data and the research. The first thing that I would say is consider existing infrastructure and engage with your waste facilities and the waste industry. That's how you're going to learn to understand what your packaging and your products are doing in terms of their life cycle. The second thing would be consider the recyclability of packaging and products. Not just because it's made from paper doesn't mean it is recyclable. Maybe it's too small. Can it go through the existing infrastructure? Are there any markets for it? Always please, where possible, monomaterials are great and easier to recycle, but I know that that's complex, certainly when marketing gets involved and says it needs to look really good and shiny. And then the last thing is, and this is maybe with my comms head on, help educate your customers as to why you're making those changes too. We're all here for the same reason, we're all got these legislative implements for the same reason, and net zero and things like that. I think the communication to people who buy products as well as consuming them and back through the supply chain needs to come from all angles. If you're making a change, explain to them why that's happening. I think is very important.
Thank you. I completely agree. I mean, I'm obviously in the waste management perspective as well, but I think having a constant discussion, making sure that that's open, making sure that actually competitors are working together as well, so having more brands come on, having more waste management providers, and then considering the end of life, considering the existing infrastructure that you're leaning into.
Dare I say that's the win-win-win?
And I think from an innovation perspective and a sustainability perspective, these things take time. They're not easy. You're going to hit blockers along the way, but as long as we're all working towards that common goal, we can make it happen. We can make that data useful, and then we can work towards the changes that we need to see to meet all of our net zero targets as well. So I'm conscious we've got a few minutes left, and I just wanted to open up to the room to see if there were any questions that you had for the panelists. Yeah.
Hi everyone. According to the British Beauty Council, they say 95% of their beauty and cosmetics packaging go into landfill. So you talked about L'Oreal earlier. So what kind of initiatives do you do at the moment for it? Because I did it for my university project recently, so that I with all the knowledge about that.
Yeah, so I mean, and that is a super interesting one. I think with L'Oreal, it's across their portfolio, so it's across personal care and cosmetics. Interestingly, I was talking to a packaging engineer who was working on the Boots and Number 7 and the take-back schemes, and he was telling me about how and that is a really good example of one, I mean, it's not the solution, but a really good example of take-back and where is cosmetic packaging going. So he told me that everything that Boots take-back is tagged because the consumer has to scan it, so they get their points, and they're able then to kind of digitally see where it's going to end up. They have a localized plant. They then turn that into a very, I mean, it is downcycled, so it is compressed plastic. But I mean, and that is not necessarily saying that that is the solution. That is one possible solution of the current situations. Do I think that cosmetics has a way to go? For sure. I think it's one of the industries, and I spoke about it yesterday, anything in your bathroom is one of the hardest categories, because who here has a recycle bin in their bathroom, right? So even if you have monomaterial, the perfect deodorant, the perfect aerosol, if it doesn't end up in the bin, that's part of the problem. So yes, cosmetics is a bit of a challenging, because price point, luxury feel, consumer perception, but also where it is for that one. But yes, I think that is one of the ones hitting the spotlight soon.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Still in the experience that you had at Sherborne in recycling post-consumer film, can you talk a little bit more about that experience, particularly the recovery rates, what percentage of film going to the plant was recovered, did it impact the speed at which you could run lines, having more film on it, that kind of
Absolutely. So we were part of the Flex Collect trial that obviously people will be aware of, and the report that came out with regards to that. In terms of the process and the vacuum suctions that come through, that's throughout the whole of the process that we have there. The speed of the lines are what we're processing in general, to be honest with you. They're quite fast. We do 47.5 tonnes of material every hour as an average. So the speed doesn't really determine how much or how well the film we can extract in terms of quality performance. We are, speaking quite frankly, we only put it into an entire film bay. We don't separate the polymers or the different plastics within the film as well. Obviously, that then goes to a separate facility who are going to take the stuff that they want to use, specifically the LDPE most likely and things like that. Interestingly, when the report launched a while back now, when we were doing the trials and tests, we were still really quite new in terms of our facility, and I think the pick rate and the success was moderate, and we've learned a lot from that, and we've managed to change the software, adapt the technology, and the AI's recognition of the material, and we're going to be obviously looking at how that's affected and obviously progressed in terms of the pick rates going forward as well. So while initially there was some good value and some good data there, we've gone back and we've changed the software, we've changed the pick rates and that, and we're going to go forward and see what we can do to improve that going forward as well.
We have time for one more question. Is there a last question? Yeah.
So the data from the recycling plants is great, and good to see the technologies coming along tremendously. There seems to be a lot of data missing on what's not going to recycling plants, so what's going to ERFs, landfills. So are there any plans to get this technology into those sites to understand what isn't being captured in the recycling? Is this the missing piece of the puzzle to me?
Yeah, so I'm probably I can talk about that in some respects, and maybe default to maybe you as well. But so in some in some European member states, we're also in so essentially dirty MRFs, where black bin bags are ripped apart to see if value can be recovered. So that's a great place for us to be as well, because we see what is in that bin bag. That also happens here. We don't talk about it as much because we don't want consumers to know that bin bags are going to be ripped open to try and find valuable material, because that's not the ideal approach. So I think from an infrastructure, and I default to Anthony and Amy on this, but I think kind of like there is the ability for dirty MRFs to operate, to rip open the bag, to try and identify and extract some valuable material, and that's what we can definitely see. We do that in the Netherlands. We see that, and we help brands understand of their products. We talked about the bathroom category of what their proportion of their packaging is ending up in a dirty MRF versus a MRF, and what is going to a PERF. So that's the full picture. But specifically in the UK, I might defer to you guys to talk a little bit more about the extraction from the residual.
We're recycling only, in all honesty, so I'm not sure I'd have much to add on dirty MRFs and obviously taking things out of hands.
But I think it's a really good point. I think it's part of what we're discussing about actually improving data across all of the areas of the value chain. But in particular with waste management, we've got digital waste tracking coming in, so we need to improve even just the baseline data of what we're seeing going into black bin bags that we could potentially extract and do something differently with. We do have various technologies. We're trialing some AI technologies on our traps that do composition analysis at the source. That should also, hopefully, you would anticipate that the technologies will all start integrating at some point in an ideal world where we would be able to see a material flow analysis across the UK. And then that would allow you to go, all right, okay, well, this proportion is going to general waste in this area or to incineration. How can we move that out of that space into recycling, reuse, redistribution? I think we've got a long way to go before we get there.
Just actually on that point, 2027, simpler recycling is going to be, well, simpler recycling now, but when flexibles get curbside recycling next year, that if we imagine, if we ask the question, why do things end up in the black bin? It's local municipalities have different, even within one borough, may have different different guidelines. So as a consumer, I think the age-old question is, where do I put my pizza box, right? And I think I've said this to different facilities that I go, and I maybe hear different things. But with simpler recycling, that is meant to address one of the issues. So it'd be interesting to see how much the black bin bag question is, if there's value in there, once simple recycling comes out. And we'll be able to know from the data that we had previously existing and in the future. So, but I think that's one regulation that I think will hopefully reduce what we see in the residual waste.
I'm going to close there just because we're at the end of our time, but we're all here for questions. If anybody has any burning questions they want to ask after the session, please let us know. But thank you so much for joining us today.